The mud seized her like a living thing, cold and merciless, and Karga knew with absolute certainty that she was going to die alone in this God-forsaken swamp miles from anyone who would mourn her. The bog had already swallowed her to her shoulders, and every desperate thrash only pulled her deeper into its glutinous embrace, her arms pinned uselessly at her sides beneath the surface. She had been tracking a wounded deer through the wetlands when the ground had simply given way beneath her boots, solid earth transforming into liquid death in the space of a heartbeat. Now the thick mud pressed against her throat, creeping higher with each ragged breath, filling her nostrils with the stench of rotting vegetation and stagnant water. Her clan would never know what happened to her. They would assume she had simply run off, another disgrace to add to her already tarnished name. Karga the Unwanted, they called her when they thought she could not hear. Karga the Weak. She had been tolerated at the edges of her clan for years, useful for menial tasks but never truly accepted. Her tusks too small and her build too lean to be considered a proper orc warrior. When she had failed to kill a human trader who stumbled into their territory last winter, showing him mercy instead of violence, the elders had finally had enough. They had not banished her outright, but they had made it clear she was no longer welcome at their fires. So she had left, striking out into the borderlands between orc and human territories, surviving on whatever game she could hunt and whatever shelter she could find. For 3 months she had managed, barely, learning which plants were safe to eat and which streams held fish. She had almost convinced herself she could make a life out here, alone but free from the constant weight of her clan's disappointment. Now the bog was claiming her as payment for her arrogance. Karga tried to tilt her head back, fighting to keep her chin above the surface, but the movement only seemed to accelerate her descent. The mud was up to her jaw now, cold and thick as congealed blood. She could taste it on her lips, bitter and foul. Her heart hammered against her ribs, animal panic flooding her veins even as her mind accepted the inevitable. At least it would be quick. At least she would not have to see the contempt in her clan's eyes anymore. Stop moving. The voice cut through her terror like a blade, sharp and urgent and undeniably human. Karga's eyes snapped open, searching frantically for the source. Through the maze of dead trees and hanging moss, she spotted him perhaps 20 feet away, a human man standing at the edge of the solid ground where the swamp began its treacherous descent. He was tall and rangy, dressed in the rough homespun clothes of a frontier settler, his brown hair pulled back from a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Do not move," he said again, more slowly this time as if speaking to a spooked horse. "Every movement pulls you deeper. Be still." Karga froze, though it went against every instinct screaming at her to fight, to struggle, to do something. The human was already moving, his gaze darting across the swamp as he assessed the situation with the practiced eye of someone who knew these wetlands. He grabbed a long fallen branch, testing its weight, then discarded it for a longer one. Not long enough. His jaw tightened with frustration. "How deep?" he called out. "To my shoulders," Karga managed, her voice coming out as barely more than a croak. "Maybe deeper. I cannot feel the bottom." The human cursed under his breath, a string of words Karga did not recognize but whose meaning was clear enough. He scanned the area again, then seemed to make a decision. To her shock, he dropped to his stomach at the edge of the solid ground and began to crawl forward onto the mud itself, distributing his weight across the surface. "What are you doing?" Karga demanded, panic spiking anew. "You will get stuck too." "Not if I stay flat," the human said through gritted teeth. He was inching forward with agonizing slowness, his arms stretched out in front of him, his body pressed as low and wide as possible against the mud. "The weight spreads out this way. Learned it from the trappers. Just stay still." Karga watched in disbelief as he crept closer, moving with the patience of a hunting cat. The mud shifted beneath him but did not pull him down, his technique keeping him on the surface where she had broken through. He was perhaps 10 feet away now, close enough that she could see the determined set of his jaw, the flecks of gray in his brown stubble. Close enough to see the way his arms trembled with the effort of pulling himself forward through the clinging muck. Why? The question escaped her before she could stop it. "Why are you helping me?" The human did not answer immediately, focused on navigating around a particularly wet patch. When he did speak, his voice was steady despite his exertion. "Because you are drowning in a bog and I am here." Does not seem like something that needs a reason. 5 feet now. 4. The mud had crept up over Karga's chin, forcing her to tilt her head back at an uncomfortable angle. She could feel it pressing against her lower lip, patient and inexorable. Her breath came in shallow gasps through her nose. "Almost there," the human said, and there was something in his voice that made her believe him. "When I tell you, reach up and grab my forearms, not my hands, my forearms. Understand?" Karga tried to nod but could not move her head. "Yes, 3 feet, 2. The human was close enough now that Karga could have touched him if her arms were free. His hands stretched toward her, strong and calloused, coated in black mud up to the elbows. "Now," he said, slowly. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Karga wrenched her arms up through the sucking mud. It felt like lifting boulders, the bog fighting to keep its prize. Her shoulders burned with the effort. Her fingers broke the surface, then her hands, then her forearms, mud streaming off her green skin. The human's hands locked around her forearms just below the elbow, his grip like iron, and her own fingers closed around his arms in turn. "Got you," he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "Now the hard part. I am going to pull, but you need to help. Try to bring your knees up, get your legs under you if you can, make yourself as small as possible." "I will pull you in," Karga protested. "You will not. I am braced. Trust me, trust." What a strange concept, to trust a human she had never met, who by all rights should have left her to die or killed her himself. But what choice did she have? Karga nodded slightly, the movement barely perceptible. The human began to pull, his jaw clenched with effort. Karga felt the mud resist, felt it tighten around her torso like a living thing unwilling to release its meal. She tried to draw her knees up, fighting against the suction, using what little leverage she had. For a long moment nothing happened, and she thought perhaps they were both going to die here, locked together in this macabre embrace. Then something gave way. She rose an inch, then 2. The human was breathing hard now, sweat mixing with mud on his face despite the cool air. He repositioned his grip, pulling again, and this time Karga felt herself sliding upward more freely. The mud released her stomach, then her hips. She got her knees under her, found something almost solid beneath the surface, and pushed with all the strength in her legs. She came free with a sound like a boot pulled from deep mud, collapsing forward onto the human. He caught her weight without complaint, already scrambling backward on his stomach, dragging her with him toward solid ground. They moved together in a desperate crawl, Karga finding her own mobility now that she was free of the deep suck, following his lead in keeping her weight distributed low and wide. After what felt like an eternity but was probably less than a minute, they reached the edge of solid ground. The human pulled himself up onto the bank, then turned and hauled Karga up beside him. They collapsed together in the dead grass, both gasping for breath, covered head to toe in stinking black mud, for a long while neither of them spoke. Karga simply lay there, feeling the solid earth beneath her back, feeling her lungs expand and contract with air instead of mud. She was alive. Against all odds and logic, she was alive. Beside her, the human was breathing just as hard, one arm thrown across his eyes. "Thank you," Karga finally managed, the words hoarse and inadequate. "You saved my life." The human lowered his arm and turned his head to look at her. Up close, she could see his eyes were a warm hazel, flecked with green and gold. There was mud in his hair, mud on his face, mud coating every visible inch of him. He looked exhausted and filthy and utterly human. "Harrison Marlowe," he said after a moment. "If we are going to nearly die together, might as well know names." "Karga," she replied. "No clan name, no honorifics." "Just Karga." Harrison nodded as if that was sufficient. He pushed himself up to sitting, grimacing at the way the mud had soaked through his clothes. "My place is about a mile from here. You should come clean up, get warm. That mud is cold and you have been in it a while." Karga blinked up at him, certain she had misheard. "Your place?" "My homestead. Small farm on the edge of the wetlands. It is not much, but it has a well with clean water and a fire." He stood, offering her a mud-caked hand. "Unless you have somewhere else to be." The question hung in the air between them, and Karga realized he must know the answer already. No orc who belonged to a clan would be out here alone, hunting in human lands. No orc with family waiting would have that particular edge of desperation she must have worn like a brand. Harrison was not asking if she had somewhere to go. He was offering her somewhere to go, at least for now. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her legs shook beneath her, weak from the ordeal, but they held. "A mile, you said, give or take. Can you walk?" Karga tested her weight, found her balance. Everything hurt, her muscles aching from the strain of fighting the bog, but nothing felt broken or torn. "I can walk." "Good." Harrison started off through the trees, moving with the confident stride of someone who knew this land intimately. "Try to step where I step. There are more soft spots around here, though none quite as bad as that one." Karga followed, keeping her eyes on his boots, matching his path exactly. True to his word, she could see places where the ground looked deceptively solid but gave slightly under his weight, and he would adjust course without breaking stride. This was a man who had learned the wetlands through experience, probably hard experience. "How did you know?" she asked after a while. "About lying flat, spreading your weight. Lost a dog to the bog when I first moved out here," Harrison said without turning around. "Good dog. I tried to pull her out the wrong way, nearly got stuck myself. An old trapper found me and taught me the right method. Too late for the dog, but I made sure to remember the lesson." There was a heaviness in his voice that told Karga the loss still pained him, even though it must have been years ago. She found herself wanting to say something comforting, but what comfort could an orc offer a human? What words existed between their peoples besides threats and curses? They walked in silence after that, picking their way through the wetlands as the afternoon sun slanted lower through the skeletal trees. Gradually, the ground became firmer, the dead trees giving way to living pines and hardwoods. Karga could hear birds calling, the normal sounds of a healthy forest, and realized how quiet the deep swamp had been. As if even the wildlife knew to avoid its treacherous heart, Harrison's homestead appeared through the trees like something from a dream. It was modest, a single-room cabin built from rough-hewn logs, with a stone chimney at one end and a small covered porch at the front. Behind it stood a barn that had seen better days, its roof patched in several places, and beyond that Karga could see the neat rows of a kitchen garden and several fenced pastures. A few chickens scratched in the yard, and a goat lifted its head from grazing to study them with typical caprine suspicion. "Home," Harrison said simply. He led her around the side of the cabin to where a well stood, its stones worn smooth by years of use. He hauled up the bucket and dumped it over his own head without ceremony, scrubbing at his face and hair with his hands. The mud sloughed off in thick streams, revealing the man beneath the muck. He drew another bucket and offered it to Karga. She hesitated, suddenly conscious of how she must look, a mud-caked orc woman standing in a human's yard, dripping filth onto his clean-swept ground. But thirst and discomfort won out over self-consciousness. She took the bucket and poured it over herself, gasping at the cold shock of the water. It took 4 more buckets before she felt remotely clean, and even then she could feel mud caked in her hair, under her nails, in places she did not want to think about. Her clothes were ruined, stiff with drying mud and swamp water. Harrison was in similar condition, though he seemed less bothered by it. "I will get a fire going," he said, wringing out his shirt as best he could. "You can dry off inside, get warm. I probably have something you can wear while your clothes dry." Karga followed him to the cabin door, then stopped on the threshold. Everything in her upbringing, every lesson her clan had drilled into her, screamed that this was wrong. You did not enter a human's home. You did not accept a human's hospitality. You did not trust a human's kindness, because it always came with a price. But Harrison had already disappeared inside, and she could hear him moving around, stirring up the coals in the fireplace, adding kindling. The door stood open in clear invitation. Slowly, feeling like she was crossing a barrier far more significant than a simple wooden threshold, Karga stepped inside. The cabin was exactly what she would have expected from a frontier homestead. One large room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a narrow ladder leading up to a sleeping loft above. The furnishings were sparse but well made. A table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair near the fireplace, shelves holding dishes and food stores, a few pegs on the wall for hanging clothes and tools. Everything was clean and organized, the space of someone who lived alone and had developed systems for managing his solitude. Harrison had the fire going now, flames licking hungrily at the dry wood. He pulled a blanket from a chest near the wall and held it out to her. "You can change behind that screen," he said, nodding toward a wooden privacy screen in the corner. "I will find you something to wear." Karga took the blanket, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. His skin was warm despite the cold water, calloused from hard work. She retreated behind the screen and began peeling off her muddy clothes, draping them over the top of the screen to dry. Wrapping herself in the blanket, she emerged to find Harrison had laid out a simple linen shirt and a pair of trousers on the table. They would be far too large for her, but they were clean and dry. "Thank you," she said again, the words feeling inadequate for the debt she was accumulating. Harrison had changed into dry clothes himself, his wet things already hanging from pegs near the fire. "You can thank me by sitting down before you fall down. You look dead on your feet." He was right. Now that the immediate danger had passed and adrenaline was fading, exhaustion crashed over Karga like a wave. Her legs trembled as she moved to the table, and she sank into one of the chairs gratefully. Harrison busied himself at the stove, pumping water into a kettle and setting it to heat. "Tea," he said, as if anticipating her question. "And then food. When is the last time you ate?" Karga had to think about it. Yesterday, the day before. Time had blurred together in her solitary wandering, meals taken when she could find game or forage, often going days between. "Not recently," she admitted. Harrison made a noncommittal sound that might have been disapproval or sympathy or both. He pulled out bread, cheese, dried meat, setting them on the table between them. "Eat. You need strength after what your body just went through." Karga wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some scrap of pride, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl that echoed in the small cabin. Harrison's lips twitched, not quite a smile but close. She picked up a piece of bread and bit into it, trying not to devour it like a starving animal, even though that was exactly what she felt like. They ate in silence, Harrison preparing the tea while Karga worked her way through bread and cheese with single-minded focus. The tea, when it came, was hot and bitter and perfect, warming her from the inside out. She wrapped her hands around the mug and breathed in the steam, feeling the last of the cold leaching out of her bones. "Why are you out here alone?" Harrison asked eventually. His tone was conversational, not demanding, but the question hung heavy between them. Karga considered lying, considered deflecting, considered simply refusing to answer. But he had saved her life at considerable risk to his own. He had brought her to his home, given her food and warmth and clothing. He deserved something resembling honesty. "My clan did not want me anymore," she said quietly. I was not what they needed me to be." Harrison nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to him. "I know something about that. My family did not want me either once they found out I planned to marry a woman they did not approve of. Said I was throwing my life away, moving out to the frontier. Said she was not good enough, not proper enough. So I left, found this place, built this cabin with my own hands." His expression darkened. "She never made it out here. Fever took her that first winter. Been here alone since." "I am sorry," Karga said, and meant it. There was a weight to his words, a grief that time had dulled but not erased. "Was 5 years ago now. Still think about her, but the sharp edge has worn off." He refilled her mug from the kettle. "Point is, I understand something about being unwanted by your own people, about having to make a new life in a place that does not quite feel like home." They fell into a companionable silence after that, the kind of quiet that exists between people who have shared something significant. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red visible through the cabin's small window. The fire crackled and popped, filling the space with warmth and dancing light. "You can stay here tonight," Harrison said eventually. "Take the loft. I will sleep down here. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next." Karga wanted to protest, wanted to say she had imposed enough already, but the thought of going back out into the darkening forest, of finding some hollow or cave to sleep in, filled her with a bone-deep weariness. "Just tonight," she agreed. "Then I will leave." Harrison's expression suggested he doubted that plan, but he did not argue. He simply showed her the ladder to the loft, gave her an extra blanket, and wished her good rest. Karga climbed up to find a surprisingly comfortable space under the eaves, with a proper mattress stuffed with straw and a pillow that smelled of lavender. Through the small window at the gable end, she could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. She lay down, pulling the blankets around her, and listened to Harrison moving around below, banking the fire for the night, putting away the dishes. Normal sounds, domestic sounds, the kind of sounds she had never really had in her life. The clan had always been communal, everyone sleeping in the long houses, privacy and unknown luxury. This was different. This was peaceful. Karga closed her eyes, expecting to lie awake wrestling with her thoughts, but sleep took her almost immediately, dragging her down into dreams of drowning and rescue, of hazel eyes and steady hands. She woke to the smell of cooking and pale morning light filtering through the loft window. For a disoriented moment, she could not remember where she was, her hand reaching automatically for the knife that should have been at her belt. Then memory returned in a rush. The bog, Harrison, the cabin. She sat up, pushing her hair out of her face, and realized she had slept through the entire night without waking once. When was the last time that had happened? Below, she could hear Harrison moving around, the clink of dishes and the sizzle of something in a pan. Her stomach immediately reminded her that one meal, however generous, was not enough to make up for days of sparse eating. Karga climbed down the ladder to find Harrison at the stove, frying eggs and some kind of meat. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Hope you like eggs." "The chickens have been productive lately." "I like eggs," Karga confirmed. She felt awkward standing there in his oversized clothes in his home, accepting his food. "Harrison, I cannot keep taking from you. Are you taking? Seems to me I am offering." He slid eggs and bacon onto 2 plates, set them on the table. "Sit. Eat. Then we will talk." The eggs were perfect, the bacon crispy and salty. Karga ate more slowly this time, trying to maintain some dignity even as her body screamed for more food. Harrison ate with the efficiency of someone who viewed meals as fuel rather than pleasure, finishing quickly and sitting back with a mug of tea. "I need help around the place," he said without preamble. "Farm work. The garden needs harvesting before the first frost, the barn roof needs patching, there is always firewood to cut and stack. Too much for one person, really. If you wanted to stay on for a while, work for your keep, I could use the hands." Karga stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "You want me to stay, to work here, if you want to. If you have somewhere better to be, I will not stop you, but if you are just wandering, trying to survive on your own out there." He gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the wilderness beyond. "This is an option. Honest work for honest pay. Food, shelter, safety, for as long as you want it." "Why?" the question burst out of her, sharp with confusion and suspicion. "Why would you offer this? I am an orc. Your people and mine are enemies." Harrison met her gaze steadily. "You are a person who nearly died yesterday and has nowhere else to go. That is what I see. As for what our peoples are to each other, well, I have been out here alone for 5 years, and the only folks who have bothered me are human bandits looking for easy pickings. Have not seen an orc war party yet. Seems to me the enmity is somewhat exaggerated. Your neighbors will not like it," Karga said, "if they find out you are harboring an orc. Nearest neighbors are 5 miles east. They keep to themselves, I keep to myself. As long as I show up to the market in town every few weeks with my goods, nobody comes out here." He shrugged. "Your choice, Karga, but the offer is genuine." She wanted to say no, wanted to preserve her pride, her independence, prove she could make it on her own. But she had been alone for 3 months and had nearly died in a bog. She had been hungry more often than not, cold most nights, constantly on guard. The thought of a warm bed, regular meals, honest work to occupy her days, it was almost too tempting to bear. "A trial," she heard herself say. "1 week. If it is not working, I leave." Harrison extended his hand across the table. 1 week. Fair enough. Karga took his hand, his grip firm and warm and sealing a bargain that felt far more significant than its simple terms suggested. The week that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost dangerously comfortable. Harrison woke at dawn and Karga quickly learned to do the same, both of them breaking their fast together before heading out to the day's tasks. He set her to work in the garden first, harvesting the last of the autumn vegetables before the killing frost came. Karga had never done farm work before, but her hands were strong and she learned quickly, filling basket after basket with squash and pumpkins, pulling up carrots and turnips, cutting down the dried bean plants to thresh later. Harrison worked alongside her, showing her what to harvest and what to leave, teaching her to tell the difference between weeds and valuable plants. He was a patient teacher, never condescending, never acting as if her ignorance was a personal failing. When she accidentally uprooted a row of herbs he had been cultivating, He simply shrugged and said they had needed thinning anyway. In the afternoons, they worked on other projects. Harrison brought out a ladder, and they spent 2 days patching the barn roof, replacing shingles that had blown away in some past storm. Karga proved better at climbing than Harrison, her orc strength and balance making it easy to navigate the steep pitch. She could feel his eyes on her as she worked, not leering but watchful, ready to catch her if she slipped. Evenings they spent preparing food for winter storage. Harrison taught her to preserve vegetables in brine, to dry herbs and meat, to make cheese from the goat's milk. His hands moved with practiced ease through these tasks, the work of years of solitary living, and Karga found herself mesmerized by the simple competence of it. This was a different kind of strength than what her clan valued, but strength nonetheless. They talked while they worked, at first just practical matters about the farm and the land, but gradually branching into more personal territory. Harrison told her about his childhood in a city 300 miles south, about the woman he had loved and lost, about the hard early years trying to make the farm productive. Karga found herself sharing things she had never spoken aloud before, the constant feeling of inadequacy in her clan, the shame of her small tusks and lean build, the way the other orcs had looked at her after she spared the human trader. "Why did you spare him?" Harrison asked one evening as they sat on the porch shelling beans, watching the sunset paint the sky. Karga had to think about how to answer. He was not a warrior, not a threat. He was just a man trying to make a living like anyone. He had a picture of his children in his pack. "I saw it when we searched his belongings. They were so small," she shook her head. "The elders said I was weak. That mercy is not the orc way, but it did not feel weak. It felt like the only choice I could live with." "Sounds like strength to me," Harrison said quietly. "Easy to kill. Much harder to stay your hand when everyone around you is screaming for blood." They sat in companionable silence after that, the only sounds the whisper of beans dropping into the bowl and the evening songs of birds settling in for the night. The week passed, then another, and neither of them mentioned Karga leaving. It was not a conscious decision to stay so much as an absence of decision to go. The work continued, the weather grew colder, and gradually the homestead became as familiar to Karga as anywhere had ever been. She learned the rhythms of the animals, the quirks of the tools, the best places to find kindling in the woods. She learned that Harrison hated mornings but loved evenings, that he could fix almost anything with enough time and patience, that he sang to himself while he worked when he thought no one was listening. She learned that she looked forward to seeing him each morning, to working beside him each day, to sitting with him each evening by the fire. It was a dangerous thing to notice, and she tried very hard not to examine it too closely. A month after Karga had arrived, the first snow came. It was light, just a dusting that melted by midday, but it served as a reminder that true winter was coming fast. Harrison spent a day in town, making what he said would be his last trip until spring unless there was an emergency. He returned with sacks of flour and sugar, salt for preserving, a few tools he had needed, and news from the wider world. "There is talk of orc raiders hitting settlements to the west," he said over dinner that night, his expression carefully neutral. "Burned a farm, killed some livestock. People are nervous." Karga felt her stomach clench. "How far west?" "Maybe 50 miles. Could be a different clan than yours, could be renegades. Either way, people are talking about organizing patrols, maybe even a militia." He met her eyes across the table. "If anyone comes around here asking questions, you should probably stay out of sight." "I should leave," Karga said flatly, "before I bring trouble to your door." "No." The word was firm, brooking no argument. "You have done nothing wrong." You are not responsible for what other orcs do any more than I am responsible for every crime committed by a human. You stay. Harrison, you stay, he repeated. We will be careful, but you are not leaving. Not unless you want to. Karga looked at him, at the set of his jaw and the determination in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. When was the last time someone had fought for her to stay? When had anyone ever wanted her presence badly enough to risk trouble over it? I do not want to, she admitted quietly. Want to leave, I mean. Something eased in Harrison's expression, tension she had not realized he was carrying. Good. Then it is settled. But it was not settled, not really. Over the next few weeks, evidence of the larger world's troubles crept closer. Harrison heard more stories on his trips to the outlying farms to trade goods, more raids, more violence, fear and anger rising on both sides. Humans were calling for orc blood, and orc clans were responding with increased hostility. The fragile peace of the borderlands was fracturing. Harrison said nothing, but Karga noticed he had started keeping his rifle closer to hand, that he checked the perimeter of the property more frequently. She noticed that he positioned himself between her and any unexpected sounds, his body going tense and alert. He was protecting her, she realized. Preparing to defend her if it came to that. The thought terrified and warmed her in equal measure. Winter closed in around the homestead like a fist, snow falling in earnest now, piling up in drifts against the cabin walls. They spent more time inside, Harrison teaching Karga to read from the few books he owned, Karga teaching Harrison some of the orc methods for tanning hides and crafting tools from bone. The cabin felt smaller with 2 people in it, but not uncomfortably so. If anything, the closeness felt natural, necessary, as if they had been meant to share this space. It was during a blizzard in late December that everything changed. They had been trapped inside for 2 days, the wind howling like a living thing, snow falling so thick they could barely see the barn from the cabin windows. Harrison was restless, pacing like a caged animal, unused to inactivity. Karga was trying to mend a shirt by lamplight, but found her attention constantly drawn to him, to the way he moved, the play of muscle under his clothes as he reached up to adjust something hanging from the rafters. "You are staring," Harrison said without turning around. Karga felt heat rise in her cheeks, visible even against her green skin. "Was just thinking." "About?" He turned to face her, leaning against the wall, his expression curious. "About how safe I feel here. About how I have not thought about my clan in weeks. About how I watch you when you are not looking and wonder what it would feel like to touch you. About how strange this all is. 2 months ago I was alone, convinced I would die alone. Now I am sitting in a warm cabin, mending clothes like this is normal." Harrison crossed to the table, pulled out the chair across from her. "Does it feel normal to you?" "Yes," Karga said honestly. "That is what is strange. This should not feel normal. I should not feel." She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Feel what?" Harrison's voice was soft, almost hesitant. Karga set down her mending, met his eyes. In the lamplight they looked more gold than green, warm and deep. "Safe. Happy. Like I belong somewhere for the first time in my life." The silence that followed was heavy with things unspoken. Harrison reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "Karga," a crash from outside cut him off, the sound of splintering wood audible even over the storm. Both of them were on their feet instantly, Harrison grabbing his rifle, moving to the window. Karga peered over his shoulder into the white chaos of the blizzard and saw a dark shape near the barn, moving oddly. "The tree," Harrison said grimly. "The big pine by the barn. The wind must have brought it down. On the barn. Looks like. I need to check, make sure it did not breach the roof. If snow gets in, the animals will freeze." He was already pulling on his coat, wrapping a scarf around his face. "I am coming with you," Karga said, grabbing her own coat. "Too dangerous." "The wind, I am stronger than you," Karga said bluntly. "If something needs to be moved or lifted, you need me there. Stop arguing and let us go." Harrison looked like he wanted to protest further, but another crash from outside made the decision for him. They went out together into the screaming wind and blinding snow, heads down, holding onto the rope Harrison had strung from the cabin to the barn for exactly this kind of emergency. The cold bit through their clothes instantly, vicious and unforgiving. The pine had indeed fallen, a massive specimen that had probably stood for 50 years before the storm finally claimed it. It had crashed onto the barn's corner, punching through the roof and wall, leaving a gaping hole through which snow was already pouring. Inside, the goat was bleating in panic, and the chickens were raising a terrified cacophony. "We need to cover that hole," Harrison shouted over the wind. "Keep the weather out until the storm passes and I can repair it properly." They worked like demons, hauling canvas tarps from the barn's interior, climbing up onto the damaged roof, despite the treacherous conditions. Karga's orc strength proved invaluable, holding boards in place while Harrison hammered, anchoring ropes while he tied off the tarps. The wind fought them for every inch, trying to rip away their makeshift repairs, but they worked with desperate coordination, each anticipating what the other needed. It took over an hour to secure the breach well enough to keep out the worst of the storm. By the time they staggered back to the cabin, they were both soaked through, shaking with cold despite their exertions. Harrison's lips had a blue tinge and his hands shook so badly he could barely work the door latch. Karga shouldered it open and half carried him inside. The fire had burned low while they were out. Karga built it back up with trembling hands while Harrison stripped off his wet clothes, too cold for modesty, wrapping himself in a blanket. She did the same, her own body shaking uncontrollably, her teeth chattering. They huddled by the fire, sitting so close they were almost touching, waiting for warmth to return to frozen limbs. "That was stupid," Harrison said eventually, his voice still unsteady. "Could have waited until morning." "The animals would have frozen," Karga pointed out. "We almost froze." "But we did not." She shifted closer, and without thinking Harrison wrapped his arm around her, pulling her against his side. They fit together perfectly, her head tucked against his shoulder, his warmth seeping into her cold skin. Neither of them moved to pull away. "Karga," Harrison said quietly. "What are we doing?" She knew what he was really asking. Not about the storm, not about the farm, but about this thing growing between them, this impossible connection between orc and human, between two people who by all rights should have remained strangers. "I do not know," she whispered. "But I do not want to stop." Harrison's arm tightened around her. "Your people would cast you out if they knew, probably kill you. I am already cast out. My people would not be any kinder. They already hate orcs if they found out I was, that we were. I know." Karga tilted her head back to look at him, at the face that had become as familiar as her own reflection. "I know all the reasons this is impossible. But Harrison, when I am with you, I do not care about impossible. I just care about this, about you." Something broke in Harrison's expression, some wall he had been maintaining crumbling. He cupped her face with one hand, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "I thought I was done with this. After Lydia died, I thought I would just work this land alone until I died. Did not want to feel this again, to risk this kind of pain again. Then you nearly drowned in that bog and everything changed." "I am sorry," Karga said, though she was not sure what she was apologizing for. "Do not be. I am not." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she did not move. When his lips met hers, it was gentle, almost hesitant. a question more than a demand. Karga answered by kissing him back, her hand coming up to tangle in his still damp hair. He tasted like tea and warmth and something uniquely him, and she felt something in her chest crack open. Some tightly guarded place she had not known was locked. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent, 5 months of loneliness and longing pouring into it from both sides. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "This is going to be complicated." "Everything worth having is complicated," Karga said. He laughed, the sound soft and genuine. "When did you become wise?" "I have always been wise. You just did not notice because you were too busy being noble and self-sacrificing." "Fair point." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. "Stay with me. Not as a worker, not as someone paying off a debt. Stay with me because you want to be here. Because I want you here." "Yes," Karga said simply. There were 1,000 complications ahead of them, 1,000 reasons why this could never work, but in that moment none of them mattered. She was here, he was here, and they were choosing each other despite everything the world said they should do. They fell asleep by the fire that night, wrapped in blankets and each other, the storm raging outside but unable to touch the warmth they had built between them. Winter deepened, and with it the bond between Karga and Harrison grew stronger. They were careful in public, maintaining the pretense that she was merely a hired hand when Harrison made his infrequent trips to outlying farms to trade. Karga always stayed behind, keeping the homestead running, tending the animals and maintaining the buildings. It chafed sometimes, hiding what they were to each other, but they both understood the necessity. In private, though, they made up for it. Harrison moved down from the loft and they shared the larger bed, sleeping tangled together against the cold nights. They learned each other's bodies with the same patient thoroughness Harrison applied to farming and Karga applied to hunting. They discovered that Harrison liked it when Karga used her strength on him, pinning him down, that Karga felt safest when Harrison wrapped his arms around her from behind, his breath warm on her neck. They learned to read each other's moods, to know when the other needed space or comfort or distraction. It was during one of these quiet evenings, as they lay in bed with snow whispering against the window, that Karga told Harrison about her mother. She had never spoken of her family before, the memories too painful, but something about the darkness and warmth made it easier to let the words come. "She was the clan midwife," Karga said quietly. "Highly respected. Everyone said I would be like her, strong and wise. But then I started growing and I was smaller than the other orc children, my tusks barely visible. My mother tried to hide her disappointment, but I could see it. Every time she looked at me, I could see her wondering where she had failed." Harrison's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "She did not fail. You are strong and wise, just in different ways than she expected. She died when I was 15. Fever took her like it took your Lydia. The clan said it was because she was weakened by shame, by having such a disappointing daughter. I know it was just sickness, but sometimes I wonder." "It was just sickness," Harrison said firmly. "You did not cause it. Your mother would have been proud of you if she could see you now, see how you survived on your own, how hard you work, how brave you are." Karga wanted to believe him, but the old wounds ran deep. She turned in his arms, burying her face against his chest. "Tell me about Lydia. Really tell me, not just the facts." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his hand stilling on her shoulder. When he spoke, his voice was thick with old grief. "She was fierce. That is the first thing people noticed about her. Fierce and funny and completely uninterested in what society thought she should be. She wanted to come out here to the frontier to build something new. Most women would have laughed at the idea, called it insane. She just started planning. What happened? Fever, like I said, but it was more than that. We were not prepared for that first winter. I had built the cabin, but we had not laid in enough supplies, did not know how harsh it would be. She got sick in November, and by January she was gone. I should have taken her back to town to a doctor, but she refused to leave. Said we would beat it together or not at all. By the time I realized how bad it was, the snow was too deep. I could not get her out. His voice cracked. I held her while she died, and there was nothing I could do. Karga held him tighter, feeling him shake with suppressed emotion. I am sorry that she did not get to see what you built here. She would have been proud. I think she would have liked you, Harrison said, surprising her. You remind me of her sometimes. That same fierceness, that same refusal to be what others expect. They held each other in the darkness, two people bound by loss and loneliness, finding in each other something neither had thought to find again. Outside, the winter wind howled, but inside they were warm and safe and together. Spring came slowly, as it always did in the North Country. The snow began to recede in patches, revealing the brown earth beneath. The ice on the well cracked and broke. Birds returned, filling the mornings with song. Harrison and Karga emerged from their winter cocoon, blinking in the stronger sunlight, ready to begin the cycle of planting and growth. But spring also brought visitors. Karga was in the garden, turning over soil in preparation for planting, when she heard the sound of horses. She straightened, her hand automatically going to the knife at her belt, and saw 3 riders approaching up the track that served as a road to the homestead. Humans, all men, armed with rifles and hard expressions. She ran for the cabin, bursting through the door. Harrison, riders. He was up instantly, moving to the window, his face grim. I know them. Neighbors from the East Settlement must have heard something. About me, maybe. Or maybe they are just checking on everyone, making sure we made it through winter. But his hand was on his rifle, and his jaw was tight. Stay inside. Let me handle this. Karga wanted to argue, but she recognized the wisdom in his words. If they saw her, even if Harrison could talk them down, the word would spread. She moved to the loft, where she could see and hear through the small window but remain out of sight. Harrison went out onto the porch, his rifle conspicuously left inside, his posture open and friendly. Morning, gentlemen, did not expect company. The lead rider, a heavy-set man with a graying beard, reined in his horse. Marlowe. Wanted to check on you, make sure you made it through the winter all right. Fine, as you can see. Farm is still standing, animals all survived. What can I do for you? The second rider, younger and leaner, spoke up. There have been orc sightings, close by, closer than usual. We are warning everyone, organizing patrols. You are pretty isolated out here. Thought you should know to be on guard. Appreciate the warning, Harrison said easily. Have not seen anything myself, but I will keep my eyes open. You alone out here? The bearded man asked, and there was something in his tone that made Karga's skin prickle. Could have sworn I saw smoke from 2 chimneys last time I passed by in the fall. Just me. Might have been burning brush in a clearing. I do that sometimes to keep the undergrowth from getting too thick. The third rider, who had been silent until now, urged his horse forward. Mind if we look around, just to be safe? Yes, actually, I do mind. Harrison's voice was still friendly but had taken on an edge. This is my property. I have told you I have seen no orcs. I do not see what looking around would accomplish except wasting everyone's time. The 3 men exchanged glances. The bearded one leaned forward in his saddle. Now, Marlowe, we are just trying to help. No need to get defensive. I am not being defensive. I am being a man who does not want strangers poking around his home without cause. Was there anything else? The tension stretched taut between them. Karga could see the calculation in the visitor's eyes. weighing suspicion against the impropriety of forcing their way onto a fellow settler's land without proof of wrongdoing. Finally, the bearded man sat back, raising his hands in a placating gesture. All right, all right. No offense meant. Just keep alert, that is all we are saying. If you see anything suspicious, you ride to the settlement and let us know. Will do, Harrison said, his shoulders not relaxing an inch. The riders turned their horses, but the young one looked back. You need anything, Marlowe? Supplies, company, anything at all. Must be lonely out here on your own. I manage fine. Thanks for the concern. They rode off, but slowly, and Karga saw the young one looking back multiple times. She stayed hidden until they were well out of sight, then climbed down from the loft. Harrison had not moved from the porch, his body still tense. They suspect, Karga said quietly. Maybe, or maybe they were just being nosy. He turned to look at her, and his expression was troubled. But you are right. They will be watching now. We need to be more careful. Being more careful meant Karga never went outside during the day when anyone might conceivably pass by. It meant no smoke from the chimney, except in the evenings when it would blend with dinner preparations. It meant living in constant low-level alertness, always listening for the sound of approaching horses. It meant feeling like a secret again, something shameful to be hidden. The strain began to show after a few weeks. Harrison grew short-tempered, snapping over small things. Karga retreated into herself, the old feelings of inadequacy creeping back in. They were still gentle with each other, still shared a bed and conversations and the work of the farm, but something had shifted. The easy comfort of winter had been replaced by a tense watchfulness. It came to a head one evening in early May. Harrison had gone to the settlement to trade, something he had been putting off but could no longer delay. He returned after dark, his expression grim, and poured himself a generous measure of whiskey before speaking. There was another raid. A farm about 10 miles west. The family escaped, but the buildings were burned. Everyone is talking about forming a militia going after the Orc clan responsible. Karga felt her blood run cold. When? Next week. They are gathering volunteers, men who can ride and shoot. They expect every able-bodied man to join. You cannot, Karga said immediately. Harrison, you cannot go hunt my people. They are not your people, Harrison said sharply. You said so yourself. Your clan cast you out. They are still orcs. What if you found my old clan? What if you killed someone I knew, grew up with? What am I supposed to do, Karga? Refuse and have them ask why? Have them start wondering what reason I could possibly have for not wanting to defend human settlements from orc raiders? They stared at each other across the cabin, the space between them suddenly feeling like a vast distance. Karga's mind was racing, trying to find a solution, but there was none. If Harrison went, he might kill orcs. If he refused, suspicion would fall on him and by extension on her. There was no good choice, only gradations of terrible. Maybe I should leave, Karga said quietly. Go deep into the wilderness where no one will find me. Let you go back to your life without complications. No. Harrison crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. No. I did not go through all of this to lose you now. There has to be another way. What way? What possible solution exists where we both get what we want? I do not know yet, but we will find it together. He pulled her close and she felt him shaking. I cannot lose you. I cannot do this alone again. They held each other as the fire burned low, both of them understanding that the fragile peace they had built was crumbling around them. Over the next few days, they barely spoke, both wrapped in their own dark thoughts. Harrison prepared for the expedition, as if going through the motions of a funeral, cleaning his rifle with mechanical precision. Karga threw herself into farm work with almost frantic energy, as if she could outrun the approaching crisis. The night before Harrison was supposed to leave, they lay in bed staring at the ceiling, not touching. "I will not kill anyone," Harrison said finally. "I will go because I have to, but I will hold back, fire into the air, claim I missed. Something. They will know. Warriors know who is really fighting and who is pretending. I do not care. I'm not killing orcs to maintain my standing with humans who would not piss on me if I was on fire." Karga rolled to face him, seeing the anguish in his expression. "What if the raiders attack while you are gone? What if they come here, then you hide? There is a root cellar behind the barn, well hidden. You take supplies and you hide there until it is safe. Harrison, promise me you will hide, not fight. Because if you fight, if you hurt or kill a human even in self-defense, they will hunt you down. Promise me, Karga." She wanted to refuse, wanted to say she would defend their home regardless of the cost. But she saw the fear in his eyes, the desperate plea, and found she could not deny him. "I promise." They made love that night with a desperate urgency, as if trying to memorize each other through touch, as if this might be the last time. Afterward, Harrison held her so tightly it almost hurt, his face buried in her hair. "Come back to me," Karga whispered. "Always," he promised. But when morning came and he rode off with the other men from the settlement, Karga stood on the porch watching until he disappeared from sight, and she was not at all certain she would see him again. The days that followed were the longest of Karga's life. She kept herself busy with farm work, but every sound made her jump. Every bird call could be an alarm. She slept with her knife under her pillow and spent her nights lying awake, listening to the darkness. 5 days after Harrison left, she heard the horses again. It was mid-afternoon, the sun bright and warm, when the sound of hoofbeats reached her. Multiple horses, coming fast. Karga's heart seized in her chest. She ran for the barn, finding the hidden trapdoor to the root cellar that Harrison had shown her. She dropped inside, pulling the door closed above her, plunging herself into earthy darkness. Through the gaps in the boards above, she could hear voices. Men shouting, the stamp of horses. Then a sound that made her blood run cold. Laughter. Not the nervous laughter of scared men, but the cruel laughter of men who had found something amusing. "Marlowe's place. Think he would mind if we helped ourselves to some of his supplies? He is not here to mind, is he? Off playing soldier with the rest of them." Karga's hands tightened on her knife. They were in the cabin now. She could hear them moving around, opening cabinets, knocking things over. Not settlers checking on a neighbor. Raiders. Whether human bandits or something worse, she could not tell from down here. "Hey, look at this." 2 cups by the basin. 2 plates on the drying rack. Marlowe's supposed to live alone, is he not? Maybe he had company before he left. Or maybe he has company now. The voices grew more animated, more excited. They were searching now, she could hear it. Looking for whoever had been living here with Harrison. Looking for her. Karga pressed herself into the corner of the root cellar, trying to make herself small, praying they would not think to check the barn. Nothing in the cabin. Check the barn and the outbuildings. Footsteps above her now, heavy boots on the barn floor. Karga held her breath, her knife ready. If they found her, she would have to break her promise to Harrison. She would have to fight. Anything? Just animal stalls and tools. Wait, what is this? Karga's heart stopped. They had found the trapdoor. She could hear them scraping away the layer of dirt and straw that covered it. The door lifted, flooding the cellar with light, and Karga found herself staring up at 3 human men, their faces twisted with triumph. Well, what do we have here? The lead man reached down, grabbed Karga's arm and hauled her up out of the cellar. She could have fought him, should have fought him, but Harrison's voice echoed in her head. If you fight, if you hurt or kill a human even in self-defense, they will hunt you down. She let herself be pulled up, her knife falling from nerveless fingers. An orc woman, one of the men breathed. Marlowe's been hiding an orc woman. Wait until people hear about this. Pretty thing for a greenskin, another said, and there was something in his voice that made Karga's skin crawl. Maybe we should have some fun before we tell anyone. Bad idea, the third man said nervously. If something happens to her, Marlowe will know we were here, could make trouble. Marlowe's off chasing orcs with the militia. By the time he gets back, if he gets back, we will be long gone. And who is he going to complain to? He was harboring an orc. That is a hanging offense. They were arguing among themselves now, debating what to do with her. Karga's mind raced, looking for options. She could fight, probably take at least one of them down before they shot her. She could run, but they had horses, and she was on foot. She could try to talk to them, but what could she say that would matter to men who looked at her like a thing instead of a person? Enough talk, the lead man said finally. We take her to the settlement. Let the elders decide what to do with her. Either way, Marlowe's reputation is ruined. Serves him right for being an orc lover. They bound her wrists in front of her with rough rope, the fibers biting into her green skin. One of them brought out a horse, and they hauled her up onto it, the lead man climbing up behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and Karga had to fight down nausea at his proximity. They rode east, toward the settlement Harrison had described. Karga tried to memorize the route, tried to think of an escape plan, but with her hands bound and 3 armed men surrounding her, options were limited. The sun was setting by the time they reached the settlement, painting the sky in shades of red that reminded Karga of blood. The settlement was larger than she had expected, maybe 20 buildings arranged around a central square. People came out to stare as the riders entered, their expressions transforming from curiosity to shock to anger as they registered what Karga was. An orc. Where did you find it? Kill it before it brings more. The men dismounted, dragging Karga with them. She stumbled, her legs stiff from the ride, and someone in the crowd threw something, a rock or clod of dirt, that struck her shoulder. More voices joined the chorus, ugly and angry, calling for her death. Everyone calmed down. The lead man raised his hands, and gradually the crowd quieted. We found this orc at Harrison Marlowe's place, living there. He has been hiding it, maybe for months. The reaction was immediate and explosive. People screamed in outrage and fear, demanding justice. Someone called for a trial. Someone else called for an immediate execution. Through the chaos, Karga kept her head up, refusing to show fear even as her heart hammered against her ribs. An older man pushed through the crowd, someone with authority written in his bearing. That is enough. We do not hold executions without a trial, even for an orc. Lock it in the storehouse for now. When Marlowe and the others return, we will get to the bottom of this. And if the militia does not return, someone called out, then we will deal with it then, but we do this properly. We are not savages. There was grumbling, but the crowd began to disperse. 2 men grabbed Karga's arms and dragged her to a sturdy wooden building at the edge of the square. They shoved her inside, slammed the door, and she heard the bar drop into place on the outside. Karga looked around her prison. The storehouse was windowless, lit only by gaps between the boards. Sacks of grain were piled against one wall, barrels lined another. No obvious way out. She slumped against the wall, her bound wrists resting on her knees, and tried not to think about what would happen next. Harrison. She had to believe he would come back, had to believe he would find a way to save her. But even if he did return, what could he do against an entire settlement baying for orc blood? He was just one man. She did not know how long she sat there in the darkness. Hours, probably. Eventually she heard voices outside, lots of them, excited and loud. The militia must have returned. Karga got to her feet, her body tense, ready for whatever came next. The door opened and Harrison was there. He looked terrible. His face was gaunt with exhaustion, his clothes filthy and torn. There was a bandage on his arm, blood seeping through. But his eyes, when they found hers in the dimness, were fierce and determined. Karga. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" "I am fine." "Your arm, just a scratch. It does not matter." He was already working at the ropes on her wrists, his fingers clumsy with urgency. "We have to get you out of here. The settlement is calling for your execution. They want to do it tomorrow, make an example." "How did you get in here?" "Told the guards I needed to question you, find out if there were more orcs nearby. They do not trust me anymore, but they have not arrested me yet." The ropes fell away and Harrison grabbed her hands, his grip almost painfully tight. "Listen to me. I have horses waiting at the edge of town, supplies packed. We are leaving, tonight, both of us." "Harrison, no, they will hunt you for helping me escape. You will lose everything." "I already lost everything the moment they took you. This place, this farm, it is just land and wood. You are what matters." He pulled her toward the door, checking outside first. "The guards are gone for now. I paid them to look the other way for 10 minutes. We need to move fast." They ran through the darkened settlement, sticking to shadows, Harrison leading her through back ways and alleys he must have scouted beforehand. Karga could hear voices from the central square, people still gathered, discussing her fate. Discussing whether Harrison should be hanged alongside her for the crime of harboring an orc. The horses were where Harrison had promised, 2 sturdy mounts with packs already secured to their saddles. He boosted Karga onto one, then swung up onto the other. They rode out at a quick walk, not running yet, trying not to attract attention. Only when they were past the last buildings did Harrison kick his horse into a gallop, and Karga followed, the 2 of them racing into the night. They rode for hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the settlement. Harrison seemed to know where he was going, following trails Karga could barely see in the moonlight. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, he slowed and led them off the trail into a thick copse of trees. "We will rest here during the day," he said, dismounting stiffly. "Move again tonight. By the time they realize we are gone and organize a search party, we will have a good head start." Karga slid off her horse, her legs shaking. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the reality of what had happened was sinking in. Harrison had given up everything for her. His home, his farm, his place in human society, all gone. "I am so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "This is all my fault." Harrison turned to her, his expression softening. "No, this is the fault of people who cannot see past their own fear and hatred. You did nothing wrong." "Where will we go? They will hunt us. Your people and mine will both want us dead." "North," Harrison said. "Into the deep wilderness where neither human nor orc settlements reach. I have heard there are valleys up there, hidden places where a person could live undisturbed. We will find one. Build a new home." He pulled her close and she felt him trembling with exhaustion. "Together. That is all that matters now. We stay together." Karga wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight, and let herself cry for the first time since the nightmare had begun. Harrison held her through it, his own face wet with tears neither of them acknowledged. They had lost so much, but they still had each other. They traveled north for 3 weeks, moving mostly at night, avoiding all signs of human or orc habitation. Harrison's knowledge of wilderness survival kept them fed and sheltered. Karga's orc stamina and hunting skills supplemented his efforts. They made a good team, each compensating for the other's weaknesses. The land changed as they moved deeper into the frontier. The farms and settlements gave way to true wilderness, vast forests broken by rushing rivers and meadows full of wildflowers. The air grew colder, crisper, flavored with pine and snow from the mountains visible in the distance. They saw deer, elk, even a bear once watching them from across a valley. They saw no other people. "I think we are beyond the edge of map territory," Harrison said one evening as they made camp beside a clear stream, "which means no one is going to come looking for us this far out." Karga felt something in her chest ease, a tension she had been carrying for weeks finally releasing. "We are safe as we can be anywhere. This is good land. We could build here." He gestured around them at the valley they had found. It was perhaps 2 miles wide, surrounded by forested hills, with the stream running through it and good grazing in the meadows. "What do you think?" Karga looked around, seeing not just the raw land but the potential. A cabin there near the trees for shelter and firewood. A garden by the stream. Pasture for animals they could trap or trade for. A life they could build together, far from the hatred and fear of the world they had left behind. "Yes," she said, "we build here." They built through the summer and into the fall, working from first light to dusk every day. Harrison knew construction, knew how to select and fell the right trees, how to notch logs so they fit together tight. Karga's strength made quick work of tasks that would have taken Harrison days alone. They worked in tandem, developing their own shorthand communication, learning to anticipate each other's needs. The cabin was smaller than Harrison's old homestead, just one room with a loft, but it was solid and tight. They chinked the gaps between the logs with mud and moss, built a proper fireplace from river stones, fitted a door that hung straight and true. They had no windows yet, but Harrison promised they would trade for glass someday, somehow. "It is not much," Harrison said the night they spent their first night in the completed cabin, "not compared to what we had." "It is ours," Karga said simply. "Built by our hands for our life. That makes it better than any palace." They made love that night on a bed of pine boughs, under blankets Harrison had packed from the old homestead, in a home that belonged to no one's judgment but their own. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Harrison spoke quietly into the darkness. "Marry me." Karga went still. "What?" "Marry me. I know we do not have a church or a preacher or any of the usual things, but I want to make a promise to you before whatever counts as holy in this place. Will you marry me, Karga?" Her throat was too tight to speak. She nodded, felt Harrison feel the movement against his chest. "Say it," he whispered. "I need to hear you say it." "Yes," Karga managed. "Yes, I will marry you." They held the ceremony the next day at dawn, just the two of them standing beside the stream. They had no rings, no witnesses, no official to bless them. But they spoke their vows to each other and to the wild land around them, promising to love and protect and stand together against whatever came. When it was done, Harrison kissed her, and Karga felt something fundamental click into place. She was no longer Karga the unwanted, the disappointing daughter, the outcast. She was Karga Marlowe, wife to Harrison, partner in this new life they were building. "I love you," she said, the first time she had spoken the words aloud, and it felt like a revelation. "I love you too," Harrison said, and there was wonder in his voice, as if he too was surprised to find love again after so much loss. That fall and winter they worked to establish their new life, hunting and foraging, laying in stores for the cold months. Harrison taught Karga more of human crafts and skills. She taught him orc methods of tracking and reading the land. They learned they were stronger together than either had been alone, their different backgrounds and abilities complementing each other perfectly. It was late winter when Karga realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling off for weeks, tired in a way that sleep did not fix, nauseated by foods that had never bothered her before. At first, she attributed it to the hard work and sparse diet of wilderness living. Then she missed her monthly bleeding and missed it again, and the truth became unavoidable. She told Harrison one evening by the fire, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "I am with child." Harrison stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and then pure joy. "Are you certain, as certain as I can be? It will be born in the summer, I think." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms with such fierce happiness that she laughed despite her nervousness. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Karga, this is amazing. Terrifying, but amazing." "You are not worried about what it will be, human and orc mixed. Our child will be perfect because it is ours. Half of you and half of me, the best of both." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach, his expression soft with wonder. Thank you for this gift." Karga felt tears prick her eyes. She had been so afraid he would be angry or disappointed, worried about the complications a half-breed child would face. Instead, he was nothing but happy, already planning how they would expand the cabin, where they would put a cradle, what supplies they would need. The months that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Harrison felled more trees and added a second room to the cabin, specifically for the baby. He built a cradle from carved wood, working on it every evening by lamplight until it was smooth and perfect. Karga sewed blankets and clothes from the furs they had trapped, making everything soft and warm. They talked about names, about what to teach their child, about how to keep them safe in this wild place. They talked about the future, about maybe finding others like them. Humans and orcs who had chosen love over hatred, building a community where mixed families could live without fear. It seemed like an impossible dream, but no more impossible than anything else they had accomplished. Karga's belly grew round with their child, and Harrison loved to place his hands on it, feeling the baby kick and move. "Strong," he would say with pride, "just like their mother." "Stubborn," Karga would counter, "just like their father." The baby came on a hot day in early August, after a labor that lasted from dawn to dusk. Harrison stayed with Karga throughout, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. When the baby finally came, sliding into the world with a furious cry, they both wept. "A boy," Harrison said, his voice choked with emotion as he wrapped their son in a blanket. "We have a son." Karga held out her arms and Harrison placed the baby in them. He was perfect. Small but healthy, with Harrison's brown hair and Karga's green-tinged skin, a beautiful blend of both his parents. His ears were slightly pointed, his jaw showed the hint of where small tusks would grow someday. He was entirely himself, unique and perfect. "What should we name him?" Karga asked, unable to look away from her son's face. "What about Hal?" Harrison suggested. "For my grandfather, who was the only one in my family who did not think I was crazy for coming to the frontier." "Hal Marlowe," Karga tested the name. Their son opened his eyes at the sound of her voice, revealing irises that were a blend of green and brown. "Hello, Hal. Welcome to your life." Hal grew strong and healthy, thriving on Karga's milk and the attention of his devoted parents. He had his mother's strength and his father's stubbornness, a combination that kept both Harrison and Karga on their toes. By the time he was 2 years old, he was running through the valley on sturdy legs, chasing butterflies and learning to fish in the stream. They were careful to teach him about both sides of his heritage. Karga told him stories of orc honor and strength, about the clans and their ways. Harrison taught him human skills, reading and writing from the few books they had, the principles his own parents had taught him. Hal absorbed it all with the ease of childhood, becoming something entirely new. Not orc or human, but both and neither, something the world had never seen before. When Hal was 3, they had visitors. It was summer again, the valley lush and green, when Harrison spotted the smoke from another fire perhaps a mile distant. He and Karga watched it for 2 days, debating what to do. Finally, caution lost out to curiosity. They left Hal with instructions to stay in the cabin, took weapons just in case, and went to investigate. They found another mixed couple, a human woman and an orc man, living in a small shelter by a lake. The woman had a baby on her hip, a little girl with the same blended features as Hal. Both groups froze at the sight of each other, equally shocked to find they were not alone. "I am Lara Denton," the woman said finally, her voice hesitant. "This is my husband Grok and our daughter Maya. We came north 2 years ago fleeing everything, I suppose." "Harrison Marlowe," Harrison said, his hand finding Karga's. "My wife Karga and we have a son, 3 years old." The relief on both couples' faces was palpable. They were not alone. There were others who had chosen the same path, who had built lives out here beyond the reach of both human and orc society. "How did you find each other?" Karga asked, and Lara laughed. "He was hunting, I was foraging. We nearly killed each other, then got to talking instead. Turned out neither of us had anywhere else to go." She smiled at Grok, who smiled back with obvious adoration. "Fell in love over a campfire and never looked back." They talked for hours, trading stories, finding common ground in their shared experiences. The rejection, the fear, the long journey north. The joy of finding someone who loved them for who they were, not what others expected them to be. The challenge and reward of raising children in the wilderness. Children who represented hope for a future where maybe, someday, mixed families would not have to hide. When Harrison and Karga returned home, they found Hal playing with the wooden toys Harrison had carved, completely oblivious to how significant the day had been. "We are not alone," Karga said, scooping her son up and spinning him around. "There are others like us, Hal. Maybe someday there will be enough of us to build something new. Something better," Harrison added, joining the embrace, "where children like you can grow up without fear." Over the following years, they found more mixed couples, or the couples found them. Slowly, carefully, a community began to form in the hidden valleys of the north. Never large, never more than a dozen families, but enough to support each other, to trade goods and skills, to let their children play together without fear. They built a meeting hall in a central valley, established trade routes between their scattered homesteads. They developed their own customs, blending human and orc traditions, creating something new. It was not perfect. There were still arguments and disagreements, still the occasional fear that they would be discovered and destroyed. But it was theirs, built on love and acceptance, and the stubborn refusal to let hatred dictate their lives. Harrison and Karga grew older together, watching their son grow into a strong young man, watching the community they had helped build flourish. They added a daughter, then another son, each child a testament to the life they had chosen. The cabin expanded, the valley became a proper homestead, the wilderness became home in a way nowhere else had ever been. Karga sometimes thought about her old clan, wondered if they ever regretted casting her out. She hoped they had found peace, that the cycle of violence and revenge had not consumed them. But mostly she did not think about the past. The present was too full, too rich, too filled with the love she had found despite all the world's efforts to keep them apart. Harrison's hair turned gray, then white, but his eyes stayed as warm and determined as the day he had pulled her from the bog. Karga's tusks grew a bit more prominent with age, and she wore them with pride, no longer ashamed of her differences. They were grandparents when the youngest families started arriving, and they took joy in watching new children discover the valley, teaching them the ways they had learned through hard experience. On summer evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over the mountains and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes Hal would visit with his own growing family, and the cabin would be full of voices and laughter. Sometimes other families would come, seeking advice or help or just company. But Karga's favorite times were the quiet evenings when it was just her and Harrison, hands clasped together, watching the stars come out over their valley. These were the moments when she remembered most vividly that day in the bog, when she had been certain she would die alone and forgotten. She remembered the moment a stranger had risked his life for hers, not because of what she was, but because she was a person in need. "You ever regret it?" she asked Harrison one evening as they sat watching fireflies dance over the meadow. "Giving up your old life, your farm, everything?" Harrison squeezed her hand, turning to look at her with a smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. "Not once, not even for a moment. That day in the bog when I saw you drowning, I thought I was just saving a life. I did not know I was saving my own life too, saving us both from loneliness, from living half alive. You are my home, Karga. You always have been." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Harrison Marlowe. I love you, Karga Marlowe." They sat together as darkness fell, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a life neither had dared to dream of. Behind them, lamplight glowed in the cabin windows. Around them, the valley breathed with life. And ahead of them, as long as they had together, stretched the future they had earned through courage and love, and the simple, radical act of refusing to let hate win. The bog had swallowed her to her shoulders. He had laid flat in the mud and said, "Grab on." And in grabbing on to each other, they had both been saved.